Welcome to the Meditation Podcast. You can find all our episodes on the meditationpodcast.org. We're also on BitChute and YouTube. I also have 4 other podcasts: the Awakening Podcast, Exposing Fraud and Corruption, but with Solutions, Learn Polish Podcast, the Crypto Podcast, and the Speaking Podcast, as well as being a podcasting coach. You'll find everything on bio.link/podcaster. My guest, happiness coach, but also author of 3 best-selling books. Please welcome Dannie De Novo.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm very good. So I briefly mentioned that you're best-selling author of 3 books and a happiness coach, but you might let the listeners know a bit more about you.
Sure. Well, I'm also a mom, and that's kind of where my journey in happiness started. I was a lawyer. I'm still kind of a lawyer, but I was a full-time lawyer, and I was living the life that I thought everyone was supposed to live. I had a good job. I had a nice house. I had a nice car, and I was married, and I was living my life, but I was miserable. And I knew I was miserable, but I never did anything to change it because I didn't know how. And then my daughter was born. And one day when she was a year old, I was in the kitchen and I was making dinner. I was stirring a pot on the stove, and I was making sauce. So it was very deliberate, slow strokes. And my daughter was on the floor and she's playing with her play bowls and spoons. And she looks up at me. She picks up her bowl and spoon and she started mimicking my stirring. And she was being very deliberate and looking at me for sort of this validation, just like mommy. And I said, yeah, just like mommy. But as soon as those words came out of my mouth, I almost fainted on top of my daughter because I realized that she was doing everything just like mommy, copying mommy. And I was teaching her how to live this very lonely, depressed, and unfulfilled life. So I sat on the floor and I grabbed her and I cried my eyes out and I promised her that I was going to learn everything there was to know about being happy. Now, I didn't think I could be happy. I didn't think I was wired for it because most of my life I had been pretty depressed and anxious and suffered through a lot of things. But I was going to learn for her sake. And I figured she was young enough that if she learned now, that she could have a great life. And so I set out to learn about happiness. I started studying it like I was studying for the bar exam back in law school. And the funny thing is I started finding teachers and gurus and people all over the world who I thought kind of had some insight into this idea of happiness. And the ones who liked me and taught me, when I started implementing what they were teaching, my life very quickly started to change. And so I was like, okay, maybe I could be wired for happiness. And then everyone in my life thought I was nuts. They thought I was crazy because I was now living this very different life than I had before. And it became a very isolating journey for me because a lot of people left my life because of it. But I felt alive. I felt on fire. And so it was not something that I was going to put down. I kept going. And then one day my little brother came to me and he said, wait, what are you doing? You're talking about this stuff and you're reading this stuff. And I said, well, everyone thinks I'm crazy. And he's like, well, I'm interested. And I said, okay, well, I'm doing this, this, and this. Why? And he said, well, you seem happy and I have never seen you like this before. And then he said, if it's working for you, do you think it could work for me too? And I said, oh, I didn't even realize how much he was suffering. So I said, yeah, let's try it. And so he started doing some of these things and his life started to change. And that's when I was like, oh, I wonder if I could recreate this for people kind of over and over again. And they can avoid that suffering, that pain, or at least bring themselves out of the pain like I had. And that's kind of how I became a happiness coach.
Excellent. And I definitely want to delve into, because I've listened to a lot of the shows and the TVs that you've been on, but I want to kind of just touch back a small bit just to kind of let people know of how bad it was, because sometimes people think, oh yeah, sure, she was depressed about her, but it was fairly deep. And I prefer that you kind of, I know it's kind of hard kind of talking about this, but there's a lot of people suffering at the moment, and to kind of understand you can make a transition, perhaps you can kind of show them, hey, look where I've come from.
Sure. So I was the expert in unhappiness. I really was. And mine started, young, probably around 12 or 13. I started feeling off. I felt different. And I wasn't excited about the same things that I was excited about. I had been a great student and suddenly school wasn't all that important to me. I didn't really want to do anything. And I didn't like that feeling because it didn't feel like me. I thought I was sick. I was tired all the time. And I was like, something's not right. So I went to my parents and I said, hey, I think I'm sick. This is what's going on. And they were like, no, it's just teenage hormones. Things are changing. You're just going to kind of have to feel this out. You're going to be okay. And I wasn't so sure about it, but I listened to them and I pushed through it. And then it just kept getting worse. And I went back to them. I said, look, this is bad. This is really bad. I don't feel right. I feel weird. And it was hard for me to explain a lot of this stuff, but at the time I was feeling tremendous guilt and I couldn't really figure out why that was. And just down, I just couldn't pick myself up. I just didn't want to get through the day. And they finally said, okay. So they took me to the doctor. They start running blood tests. Of course, they can't find anything wrong. And I'm going to specialist after specialist. And finally, one person says, hey, I'd really like for you to talk to this one woman in my office. Would you do that for me? And I said, yeah, I just want to get better. So I'll do whatever you want me to do. And she was a therapist. So I sat down across the table from her and I started telling her everything that I felt and what was going on. And she just kind of leaned back in her chair and said, honey, I think you're depressed. And I said, well, I don't even know what that means, but I don't think I am. And let me tell you why. Because even at the age of 16, I kind of knew that I had a pretty good life compared to most people. I mean, I had never really seen violence. I lived in a nice home. I went to a good school. I grew up with horses. I mean, my life was, as far as I saw, it was pretty good. And she just looked at me again. She said, honey, I think you're depressed. And I said, okay, well, what do we do about it? Because I don't know anything about this. But I know it's not a good thing to have. And I know people don't really look at it as a good thing to have. So she said, well, I think we should start you on some medication. And so she picked up the phone and she called the doctor. And the next thing I know, I started on this journey of trying medicine after medicine, which I believe just made me worse. I mean, I did not do well on the medication. I became very spacey. My pupils dilated horribly. I couldn't go outside without sunglasses on. I just felt very detached from myself, very foggy. And then I became really suicidal. And I managed to graduate high school. I went off to my first year of college. And then, of course, I started drinking on top of taking the medication. But I did really well my first year of college for some reason, even though I was not good. I was blacked out drunk. I really did not like myself very much. Somehow I made it through and I went home for the summer and I crashed. And I tried to go back for sophomore year. I made it a few weeks and then had to call my parents to come pick me up. And I ended up voluntarily committing myself to a mental institution because I was that suicidal. And I knew that I was behaving recklessly and that I was probably going to get lucky sooner or later. So I went there and I got more and more medication prescribed for me. So now I'm really feeling detached and out of control. But now I'm going into group therapy sessions with these women who are also there with me. I mean, it's a full lockdown unit. And they're talking about abusive relationships and losing children. And I mean, just the things that they had to go through, how traumatic they were. And here I am sitting here and I don't really have a reason. I'm just really depressed. And so I feel even more tremendous guilt. And I have all this shame piling up about, being the young girl on the psych ward now. It just wasn't a good situation. But they gave me more medication. After 2 weeks, they let me go home. And I held it together through the holidays for the sake of my family. But then on the other side of it, I really tanked. And I said, I got to go back because I don't want to live anymore. And I know that I'm going to succeed. And so when I went back in, they said, we've done everything we can do for you. We've got nothing left. And I said, well, you don't understand. If I leave here, I know I'm not coming back. I know I'm not really going back anywhere. I'm gonna succeed in this. And I'm just telling you that now. And they said, well, the only other option we have left for you is electroshock therapy. And, what did I know? I was 19. I had zero life experience at that point. I didn't have anyone advocating for me. My parents just didn't know what to do. They're just confused. And so I said, okay, well, I want to get better. So I'll do what I need to do. And I signed on the dotted line. I was of majority age, so it was all good. And the next thing I know, they're wheeling me down to the secret part of the mental institution that no one knows about. It's underground in the middle of the building. And I get wheeled in there on the wheelchair, and there's, this is obviously way before COVID. So, I mean, everyone's already suited up, looks like they're going into surgery with their masks on and everything. And I got very confused. I was like, I'm not having surgery. And they're like, well, you're going under anesthesia. And I was like, oh, well, what exactly, is going on here? And then this woman just shoved this medicine cup in my face. And she said, here's 2 pills, take these, and you can't have any water. And I said, oh, I was like, please, no more medication. I can't take any more. And she said, no, honey, it's Tylenol. Trust me, you'll be glad that you took it later. So I choked on the pills, and they strapped me down, and they wheel me through these 2 double doors into this room that I swear looked like Frankenstein's laboratory. I mean, there's just, there's whirring, and there's dials and switches and big levers everywhere. I mean, it looked like this thing had been built in like the 1600s. I mean, it was just frightening. And I started to cry and shake. And I said, you know what? I think I changed my mind. I don't want to do this. And by that time, they had already put the anesthesia in me, and I was starting to, go black. And the last thing I remember is they pushed my head down onto the bed, and they strapped that down. And as my head hit the pillow behind me, I just saw this giant man coming at me with these 2 big probes in his hand. And then I blacked out. And when I woke up in this dark room, and I opened my eyes, and I was like, oh, I was so glad I had taken that Tylenol, because I had a headache, like I had been hit in the head with a sledgehammer. I went through those treatments every other day for weeks and weeks and weeks. I eventually got discharged, and I would still go in for a morning treatment at the beginning of the day, and then sleep it off the rest of the day. And then one night I was at dinner with the same little brother that came to me in the story before, and he started telling the story about us on our ponies when we were little. And he was very animated about it. It was like a very, very important, very positive memory for him, right? So he's like going through the story. He's like, we went here and we weren't allowed to, but we did anyway. And then we jumped over this creek. And he's like, don't you remember we found this? And I can't remember any of what he's talking about. And he just keeps going. And then I can see his face start to drop. He's so upset that I can't remember this very important childhood memory. So I just felt so bad. So I started saying, yeah. And I just started repeating back to him what he had said. And he was like, yeah, you remember. And I said, yeah, I remember. And I pushed myself away from the dinner table. I ran into my bedroom, and I pulled my photo album out from underneath my bed, and I started going through the pictures, and I realized that I had lost most of my childhood memories. I just couldn't remember anything. And that's what really scared me. I mean, I was not getting better. I was no less depressed than I was at the beginning of the treatments, but I was so scared and so just physically torn up that I went to them and I said, you know what? I'm good. I am not depressed anymore. We can stop. And they said, okay, well, you prove it. And I said, okay, what do I have to do? So they gave me a list of things that I had to do. And I had to get, back in school. I got a part-time job. I started doing, things daily and logging it for them, and, having people check in on me, et cetera, et cetera. I had remembered my parents telling me at one point in time that I made life hard for myself because I was always asking questions, right? And asking really hard questions. What is life all about? Why am I here? Kind of things. And they said I always had to kind of go against the grain. And then if I would just sort of go with the flow like everyone else, that life would be easier, and maybe I wouldn't feel as bad as I did. And so I was like, you know what? As nothing else has worked, maybe this is something that I need to look at. And so I started faking it, and I started being like, quote, everyone else. I finished school. I went to law school, and I put a smile on my face every day, just like everyone else. Again, but I was not a happy person. I was really still dying inside, but the fear of going back to where I had been was enough to put that smile on my face every single day. And I really don't know how long I could have gone, truthfully. if my daughter had not been born, I doubt that I would be around right now, because I'm pretty sure I would have relapsed, because I never dealt with the reasons that I was so unhappy, the reasons I was depressed. I didn't know how. I didn't even know what they were, and had never really gotten the advice that I needed to really look internally and figure that out. It was just sort of dealt with symptomatically. Take this pill, you'll feel better. Don't think about it, you'll feel better. Don't do it that way, you'll feel better. And none of that had worked. And so I really thought that there was something wrong with me. Um, add in some not so great relationships in life, and I was in a pretty bad place. I mean, I was not able to make eye contact with myself in my own bathroom mirror. I would catch myself looking at myself and I would have to look away. I just had so much shame and such a lack of self-worth at the time that that I really didn't see any reason for me to be here. But then my daughter came, and she obviously tethered me enough to really want to look at things. And I think that's the most important part, is your why. She became my why. When I wake up every morning, on my bedroom, the first two things I see are a picture of my daughter, and then there's a little plaque next to it that says, uh, when you feel like quitting, remember why you started, right? So she was the initial way that I pulled myself out of it. And then when I started changing, then it became a really amazing way to live every single day. And then I had this initial shame of, oh my goodness, there's so much of this good stuff in life, and I wanted to kill myself. I had no gratitude for it whatsoever. I wasted all that time, but that was something that I had to overcome. And I had to put down the shame and the guilt and everything else that was associated with it, and sort of rebuild my self-worth and my self-esteem, uh, at the same time trying to find my happiness and find a way to recreate it for my daughter too. So I took on a lot, and it was something that I absolutely needed to do. Is it easy? No, it is not an easy thing to do, to go out and find your happiness. You really have to be brave to want to do it. But again, if your why is big enough, it will push you through the fear, push you through the defeated days. And on the other side, it is completely and totally worth it. So for those people who are in their darkest moment, who have hit rock bottom, I understand. I know it's not easy. It was not easy for me. I just found a way to keep going.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. And like just a few things that kind of you mentioned on that. One is, the tablets that they were giving you, because unfortunately, through my own research, a lot of the doctors, they're getting kickbacks. And I know that
Yeah.
Prozac and there's other ones as well, they give them out like Smarties. And unfortunately, they're doing it because they're lining their pockets. So that's one thing that I would kind of encourage people, because even on more research, the toxins in any tablets, because they're petrochemicals, like they actually, they're not good for you no matter what. And there's
Right.
very few, like there's a load of natural things out there. So that's one thing that's kind of like, you're too young to know that. Even there's very few people that actually know that. And it's just through your own research that you find these things out. And
Right.
like, even I had bad back at one stage, and I remember getting tablets. I was bouncing off the doors. I was like, this is not good for me. I don't feel myself. And the other thing is the electrotherapy. I mean, I've heard of that before, but like, is there any kind of evidence that actually works? Because I mean, that sounds terrifying. And the fact that you actually didn't remember your childhood is scary. Like, is there research to show that it works, or is that another quackery that they're just pushing on people to pretend it's working?
Yeah. It's so hard because there's good therapists and there's bad therapists, and there's good doctors and there's bad doctors, unfortunately, right? And how do you know the difference? I think experience, like you said, in your own research says a lot. I think it's a very difficult, depression is a very difficult thing to treat, because if you're a doctor and you've never been depressed, how do you even know what to do? Because think about it, other things are wrong with the human body. It's a little bit different. Everybody has felt physical pain at one point in their life, right? So they understand that idea. And if you're looking at something like the heart or the kidney or something like that, you have an idea of mechanically how it works, right? I mean, they've done they've done their research in medical school. They've physically seen these things working. So they have an idea of, so even if they've never had a heart attack, they can kind of put two and two together and sort of understand what that might feel like. But if you never had depression, how do you really understand that concept? So to treat it, I think, is really difficult for someone who's never been through it. So I like to give them a little bit of compassion, but at the same time, it would have been great if someone had said, we really have no idea what to do with you because you're such an interesting case. The electroshock therapy, there are physicians who believe that it works. There are studies that have been done. I believe what happens is that they have the same sort of reaction I had, like your brain gets totally scrambled. I didn't know what planet I was on. I was lucky if I could kind of make it through the day. And I think it does sort of a reset to what the point where your brain is like, I'm just going to focus on survival right now. I don't have time to think about anything else. And so they just kind of, it gives you sort of a reset. And I think for some people that gives them the point to be like, okay, we're just going to kind of clear everything out and we're just going to focus on this. And it gives them kind of a sense of presence, if you will, that they maybe didn't have before. But if you do your real research and you see the people that have been subjected to it, a lot of them have a really difficult time post-therapy. A lot of them are addicts. A lot of them relapse into depression. A lot of people end up committing suicide. People like me don't make it, and I know that, and I don't take that for granted one single day. I know there was a reason that I did make it, and obviously it's to help those people who are in that space now who think that there is no hope. So the doctors still, because there are people that are able to sort of reset themselves after it, they still utilize it, but it is torturous. I mean, it was pure torture. It was terrifying. It's treated as completely clinical. I mean, which I understand doctors have to keep their distance to some extent, but I was a baby at the time, and it was a lot. It was a lot to just even process that trauma, along with anything else that I was experiencing before that had even occurred, right? So they kind of gave me something else to deal with instead of helping me with the problem. Everything is treated so, again, symptomatically, right? This hurts, okay, take this pill and you won't feel the pain anymore. Well, okay, great, but you haven't dealt with the reason that the pain occurred in the first place. And that's how we look at all of these things. I mean, to think that you could take a pill to be happy is really kind of a funny concept, right? Because even if it works, and I know that some medications do work for people, and I'm not a doctor and I'm not pretending to be one, but I know they work for some people. But just to think that, okay, I've taken this pill, it made me happy. So now what? I have to take this pill for the rest of my life. I'm completely dependent upon this for my emotional state. I mean, that's kind of a scary place to be in and of itself. So I think there's a lot to tackle and a lot to take on right now. I think you have to really, again, do your own research, really listen to yourself, to your own body, to your heart, and do what feels good for you and keep other people's opinion out of it.
No, definitely. And even just on the placebo effect, sometimes they get better results, which shows it's the mind. So kind of going into the mindset, because I know you kind of do the meditation and the breath work. You might
Yes.
kind of let me know your journey on that, getting into the meditation and breath work.
Yeah, so I was completely ignorant. I knew nothing about anything. When I started studying happiness, I started in the two places where I thought that something might be there, right? It was religion and philosophy. And those are the things that I started reading and studying. I had grown up Roman Catholic, and I saw a lot of guilt and shame involved in that religion. So I kind of deviated from that mindset and went to other places and discovered meditation. And didn't know what I was doing when I started with that either. But of course, you start seeking out teachers, and just like there are good therapists and bad therapists and good doctors and bad doctors, there's good meditation teachers and bad meditation teachers. And the great part about it is you learn from both. You learn what not to do and you learn what works for you. I was also became very interested in other forms of treatment for people, right? I mean, I was all about anything that could work. What is the answer? What are the answers? And so my first book was really just about the trial and error of me taking on these things, seeing what worked for me, what didn't. And I just sort of suspended all, expectation and belief and just said, okay, I'm going to treat this like a science experiment and see exactly what works and what doesn't, and give it, enough time to say that I actually tried it. And so, you start looking at other treatment modalities, and psychedelics come up. And I had read about one doctor in the 50s who had done a lot of treatment of very suicidal people with LSD and had great results. But then LSD was illegalized. It was, and he couldn't use it anymore. So he had to come up with a new way of getting to the state that these people were getting to on the LSD. And he developed this holotropic breathing technique. And then he had passed it down, and I was actually lucky enough to work with one of his proteges on learning that breathing technique, which, sort of takes you to this altered mental state. I really think that people are scared of things like that because, again, it's not something that we're taught. It looks weird to us. We think we're doing it wrong. If we, are thinking at all, we think that's bad. I can't sit still. I can't do this. And the truth is, you just really have to start small and build it up. Just like if you were going to the gym and building up muscle, it's not going to happen overnight. But anything that you can do to switch the focus off from all of those voices in your head to bring it back to the voice in your heart is good. So you can light a candle and you can stare at the flame, or you can, go to a beautiful place in the world and just stare at a beautiful landscape. You don't have to do these, grandiose 20-minute sit on the floor in a quiet space kind of a thing. I'm a mom. I have a little girl. So one way that I do it is, as soon as I get up in the morning, I will go and I'll literally lock myself in the bathroom, and I'll sit on the floor in the bathroom and I'll meditate there and give myself a few minutes there, because I know it'll be quiet for a little while, and it's a space that, no one's going to bother me in, and I can just kind of just sort of reset for the day. It doesn't have to be hard, but it needs to be consistent, and it needs to be a meaningful practice to you. It doesn't matter what it means to anyone else. It just is about you connecting with yourself, because when you learn to get rid of all those voices that aren't yours or aren't the true voices, and you finally connect again with that true voice in your heart, and it's quiet, it's subtle. That's why it gets drowned out very easily. That's why the meditation is necessary. But when you connect with it again, that voice will tell you everything that you need to know about being happy. It has all of the answers for you. So it is this amazing resource that you have, that you carry with you, but it's so easy to lose touch with. And especially, in today's society, and we're busy, and we're very attached to social media and competing on that. And we're very attached to society's opinions and the opinions of people we love. And so again, that's where the bravery comes in, of really, number one, being brave enough to listen to that voice, and then being brave enough to act in conformity with it, right? These are not easy things to do. They're really, really hard. But so worth it. I mean, talk about complete game changer in your life.
And like with everything, you can only have one emotion. And a lot of people, especially in the last it's nearly 3 years now at this stage, negativity. People are listening to the radio, they're listening to the news, and that becomes the topic of conversation. And like, a lot of people aren't aware, but some people, I know, let's call them, they call themselves awake, that they understand what's going on, and others don't. And yet in social media, they're all seeing what they actually want. And that's the way they actually work. It shows you what you want to see, because it sees you spending time on a certain thing. So if you're kind of concentrating on the negative, you're bombarded with the negative. So where's your thoughts going to go? You're going to be just constantly negative. Whereas, for me, it's like, I love listening to comedians and everything. That's the kind of things that show me, looking for happy things. I like art and stuff like that. Everything is kind of in the positive. So you just have to
Yeah,
kind of make that shift. So I love the
you
way
do.
that you've actually done and used your child. And I've seen it. You've used you've got a terminology clone, I believe it's called. That you might touch on it, because I thought that was actually beautiful as well. I've seen it on one of the
Oh,
TV shows that you've been
yeah.
on.
Yeah, so the concept I say is mirror child, right? Because everyone's always like, "Oh, can you help me with my kid?" I'm like, "Yeah, if if we can help you first, because if you show me an anxious kid, I will show you an anxious parent, right? If you show me a depressed kid, I'll show you a depressed parent. It doesn't always show up exactly the same way, but what you don't realize is that your child is mirroring back to you your behavior in some way, shape, or form, right? Or a parent or some caretaker in some regard, right? So you've got to be very careful. You've got to be very aware of what you're doing, of what you're thinking, of how you're behaving, because your children learn how to be happy by watching you. It's not taught anywhere else. It's not taught in school. There's no teaching in kindergarten, even. There's no happiness 101 when you get to college. There's nothing. So they learn that barometer of their life by watching you. And if you aren't a very happy person, or if you do things like I say they clone your behavior. So C, for example, is climate, right? And I say your overall climate. And I love that word because it gives you a great visual. Are you the one who is walking around with that heavy rain cloud around you all the time, right? Always worrying, always talking about the negative stuff, always gossiping. That's a terrible behavior, right? Or when you walk into a room, do you bring the sunshine with you? And I don't mean you have to walk in with like jazz hands, like skipping around, right? Because that's not sustainable. And happiness should be a sustainable state. But when you walk in, do you bring some little glitter of positivity with you, right? I mean, how do you start each day? Do you start it in a positive way with a positive attitude? How do you start each day with your kids? Is everyone running around and screaming and whatever else? Or do you set the intention to have a good day? One of my mentors was Bob Proctor. And I remember him telling a story about he and his son, they call each other. He passed away, but they would call each other every morning. And they did something called talk good behind people's backs. And I just love that concept. So it's something I adopted with my daughter when she was old enough, right? And so now she'll come home and she'll tell me, "Oh, so and so was saying this about somebody." So I said, "Oh, we should talk good about behind people's backs." And so I just started saying really nice things about that person who wasn't around, and then other people joined in. So that's what I mean. Like, my daughter's climate is in a place where she perceives negativity coming in. She doesn't condemn anybody for it. She just says, "Oh, why don't we shift it to a positive note," right? And everybody can leave the conversation feeling a little bit better about themselves or just about life in general. I mean, I think the ability to do that at such a young age is huge. I mean, think about what it could change in your life if you had that awareness and that power. Um, so yeah, it's really just about being aware of what you're doing, which is a really difficult thing to do. Again, meditation will help you do that, because to be aware, you've got to be able to pull yourself back into the present moment and kind of watch your own behavior through sort of these unobjective lens, right? A difficult skill to develop, but you can do it over time. And yeah, you're going to see things about yourself that you don't like. I mean, I still every day I catch myself doing stuff, but that's the human part. Those parts have to be accepted and loved too, and then you can change them. But you can't change anything if you're not watching yourself, if you're not paying attention to what you're doing. And if your child is having issues, that's a great wake up call to you that you're probably doing something to, help form that behavior.
No, absolutely. And I think these days, unfortunately, the children are glued to technology because they're looking at their parents glued to technology. And
Right.
like, one thing that I did is last year I challenged my son that we'd read 100 books each. And he did.
Oh, that's so great. He did it.
He did just on the last day, because he was actually sick for a week by Christmas, but he actually did it. And, like, I've noticed that even with games, like, some people, they're buying all these big, like PlayStation 5 and all these different remote control, different things. But it's like board games and card games and stuff like that. like I play a lot with him, and I noticed that he doesn't go in. I mean, he has a phone because one, he can communicate with us, and it's not that I
Right.
stop him because everybody's doing it, but you kind of limit it, you know, you make sure. But I
Yeah.
noticed that every time we're just constantly playing games, he doesn't even think about it. It's like
Yeah.
it's just the entertainment. It's a form of, they're bored sometimes and are on the phone, and unfortunately, the parents are kind of shown, and then they're giving out about their child. So as you're kind of saying, like what you said earlier, it's like a reflection of yourself. The child is
It
just
is.
mimicking what you're doing.
Of course they're doing it. You have to be really careful because, especially, that there's this whole stigma and pressure to be the super mom, right? Like you've got to be able to do everything. And great, be Wonder Woman. I applaud that. I am so for that. But you have to be really careful. And I used this example the other day. Think about when you're in your to-do list mode and you're multitasking, right? So you're driving and you're texting somebody back that you were supposed to get back to yesterday, and there's music playing, and you're trying to put on your mascara, and your kids are in the back seat talking to you, and you get to the place that you were supposed to go. But when I do that, I have no idea how I got there. I don't remember the journey at all. I couldn't tell you what song was playing while I was driving, right? I don't remember the text that I sent. Did I send it? Did I not send it? What did I say? I can't remember. I've got mascara all over my face. And my daughter's looking at me with this really annoyed look because she knows I haven't heard really a word that she said, right? And to me, those are really scary moments because it means you haven't connected to any piece of your life. You've not experienced life. You've gone from task to task, and maybe you've gotten those tasks done, but you're completely disconnected from the whole point of being here, right? And so if you find yourself in those modes and you're just sort of mindlessly scrolling through your phone or you're binge watching things, uh, you have to really ask yourself, what are you trying to escape? Um, what are you trying to not feel? What are you trying not to connect to? And if that answer is so painful that it's difficult for you to even admit it, then it really is time to take a look inside and say, what can I change about my situation? What can I change about my life? And that might not be easy. Those decisions are not easy to make. They're not easy decisions to carry out, but they're necessary, right? I mean, I'm divorced. That was not an easy thing to go through, but I also knew that it was paramount for what I wanted to teach my daughter about life, right? And so, and it was necessary for a lot of people's happiness. Uh, an easy thing to go through? No, not at all. Painful, but necessary. And so that is the way that I see growth, right? It's either the pain of remaining in this situation day after day, week after week, year after year, or it's the temporary pain of moving through it and changing things for the better. My father passed away when he was very young, and I saw him kind of constantly running this race. He was kind of the mindset of when I make this much money, I'll be happy. When I finish this, I'll be happy. When I've accomplished this, I'll be happy. And he would do those things and he wasn't any happier. And so he was just kind of on this treadmill, and at the same time really sort of denying himself the things that I think would have made him happy. But he was ignoring it or putting it aside because he had all those voices in his head telling him things like, this isn't the right time, you can't afford it, it's too late in life, all these things that were going through his mind, I'm sure. And I never really saw him be happy. And I know he was capable of doing it. But he just denied his heart so many times that it literally exploded. He had a massive heart attack and stroke, and he died at such a young age. And I still feel guilt today about not being able to do more to save him. But of course, I realize intellectually that he had to save himself. I had to save myself, right? And I can help my daughter. I can give her that springboard, but ultimately her decision to be happy or not happy will be her decision as well. All I can do is be a leader by modeling the behavior. And that's what you need to do for your children. But in your own life, you need to be that leader too. And not let yourself off the hook. Like your happiness is just too important of a goal, of an endeavor to make the excuses that I know that you want to make.
Excellent. And I mean, I went through a divorce as well. And like, I remember thinking, because a lot of the time it's the children suffer because when there's tension there, and it is obviously difficult to break through, but like the child then is in two environments where it's totally loved instead of, and some people,
Yes.
they try, I know so many people, they stay together for the sake of the child. And when you know, I mean, obviously there's ways you can go to therapy and stuff, but there's just times you're just on different wavelengths and you
Yes.
just know it's not going to work. And like, I know that it was the best decision that I made. Like that's, when you see it, and my child
Right.
is extremely happy. And what's brilliant is, I mean, I mentioned earlier about the 100 books, but I was there because I'm big into my kind of New Year's list because I tend to achieve it when I kind of plan it out. So I was like, are you going to read 100 books? No, my plan is to be happy. And I was like, what? Yeah, I just want to be happy, and I want all the people around me to be happy. And I thought,
Oh,
okay,
that's nice.
excellent. I thought,
Yeah.
excellent.
That is a great goal, right? And so much of that is knowing yourself, right? Knowing what makes you happy, and I mean, I'm sure you provide the space for him to explore those things. So many people, and they get older and they say, I don't even know anymore, and it's like, well, you've completely lost touch with that passion in your life. That's another thing you have to demonstrate for your kids. If you're not out there seeking out something that you're passionate about, doing things you're passionate about, how do they ever learn to have that kind of thing in their own life, or to pursue it? And if they don't see you pursuing it and failing at it and then getting up and trying again, how do they know to keep doing that either? Uh, I think we take for granted how much parenting is really is lead by example. Um, you want to be a good parent, then do the work that you need to do to be a happy person, and that will be enough to lead your kids along with you. Again, the decision will be up to them ultimately, what they do with their adult life day in and day out. But this is your life too. And even if you don't have kids, of course, this is your life. And I think that's what hit home with me with my father, is that you're given this one life. You've got one opportunity. You don't know when that's going to be taken away from you. I did not want to be watching the clock tick down and then know that at any given moment, that could be the last tick, right? And what, I'm just going to sit here and be regretful of all the things that I didn't do, or am I going to try, right? Because even if I don't accomplish them at the end of the day, I can say, I really tried. I really tried. No excuses, nothing left on the field. I tried everything I wanted at least, and I learned some stuff along the way, and I did not live a boring, unfulfilled life. I led a great life. And it doesn't mean it has to be grand, right? It doesn't have to be this grandiose picture of these celebrities that you see on social media and on TV, right? You don't have to be traveling around the world and, doing all these crazy things. I mean, you could have a simple garden in your backyard and just have so much love and passion for that every single day, connecting with Mother Earth. And that could be an amazing life. So you really have to find what it is for you, and let go of this idea that it has to be this huge, amazing thing as far as everyone else is concerned. It can be really simple. The more work that I do, the more I realize I don't need very much to be happy.
Exactly. And just another thing as well is who you're surrounded with. That you
Yes.
mentioned going into the room and kind of lifting things up, but there's also people that suck the energy out of you.
Oh,
And
of course.
I like, there's times before we'd be kind of cultural and we wouldn't want to do that, but I straight away now, I don't. I just say, yeah, they're
Right.
they're not serving me. I choose to be happy, and I don't want people that are sucking my energy away. And do I ever regret that? No. You always surround yourself with the people that make you laugh, make you
Right.
smile, and you're lifting each other up. And I see that with kids. Kids tend to do that. And like, I noticed with my son, like, he's just constantly doing things that's making him happy. And you wonder what point in life that we suck that out of them, and that they go to,
because we do it.
yeah, we
Yeah.
do it to them. So we have to make sure, bring back the inner child in ourselves, and make sure that we're just doing, like, if you like painting, paint, as you say, out in the garden. I love going out in the garden reading my books. I'm as happy as Larry when in the summer, in the spring, the sun shining on me.
Right.
And simple things like that, that's me fully content.
Right. It's the subtle joys. And when you're living more presently, they pop up more and more. And it becomes a very easy thing to do every day. I mean, it used to be very easy for me to be depressed every day because I did it every day. It was a cycle, it was a pattern of behavior. And now, because I work on my happiness every day, it's a very easy thing for me to do. But I don't take it for granted. You know, it's just like I said, going to the gym. If you want to be in shape, you go to the gym consistently, and then you have to stay consistent to maintain that. And the same thing is true with your happiness. As soon as you kind of forget about it and don't pay attention to it anymore, it will start to, slide away from you. So it's probably the most important thing you can do for you and everyone around you every single day.
Excellent. Absolutely. So thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. You might let people know how they can get in contact with you.
You can find everything about me on my website at DannieDeNovo.com, and my books are also available on Amazon.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. I'll make sure I put the link both in the audio and the video. So that's all for the meditation podcast and also the awakening podcast. I put this on the awakening because it's such an important topic, and the fact that there's so many people that are kind of with the last 2.5 years, they're feeling it, the doom and gloom. So I think this is actually important to lift the spirits up, make you feel better. And the best way to do it is to understand inner body, inner love. And that way, do the things you love and you'll be a lot happier. So you'll find everything about me and my other podcast, bio.link/podcaster. Make sure if you get the book to give her a 5-star rating because it really helps. And also give the podcast a 5-star rating. Until next week, take care.